Courage and honor, cousin.
Into the fires of battle, unto the anvil of war.
Hello, and welcome to Warhammer 40k's Grim History from the Beyond. I'm Zekar.
And I'm Yuxin.
We are the chroniclers of all that was, and all that will be in the 41st millennium. We've seen the rise and fall of many empires, and this month we'll be discussing the elite of the elite, those guys in gold, the Adeptus Custodes.
That's right, Zekar, and this week we will be talking about some of their more notable Custodes.
Right you are, Yuxin. Before we get into this, don't forget, folks, that we will be dropping the final part of our three-part event on Bilka's Brigade, live on June 23rd, where our strange crew reaches the Octarius Prime, called Get to Get.
Quite right, Zekar, and like we predicted, the audio was significantly better on the last one. Yet there were some glitches that we were able to rectify midstream that should be a problem next time. And lastly, if you want to support this channel and find an awesome new fantasy read, go ahead and pick up my brother's book, The Jotunice. Just click on the hyperlink or type in the title in the description wherever you get your books. I can't wait to get my hands on the paperback when it comes out.
But we must press on with our legendary heroes of the Custodes, and there is nobody better to start with than Constantin Valdor.
Indeed.
Now, there are few warriors in the entire history of the Imperium who have ever come close to the martial magnificence, selfless dedication, and strategic excellence of Constantin Valdor, the first Captain General of the 10,000. He was a most excellent warrior, and a being of supernatural stature and gravitas, such that many had likened him to one of the Primarchs of the Space Marine Legions, and that he could even have matched one of the Emperor's sons in a contest of blades.
Who?
Your guy, Alfarius.
That seems a little highly unlikely. In fact, I believe I read the scribings you're referring to, written by the Primarch himself, and touched up by famous scribe Mike Brooks. And he said...
Okay. This is a little over the top. But to give you an idea of just how good he was, he did battle Alfarius. And while it is recorded that Valdor was in power armor and the Primarch was not, it ended in a stalemate. You see, I was getting there.
Uh-huh.
Now, mind you, even Alfarius admits that the battle was too short to really prove anything. Just a couple of blows and parries. Yet, still fairly interesting. It is also mentioned in the works of Diocletian Coros in his glorious tome, and I quote, "How easy, all of a sudden, to see how Constantin Valdor, the Captain General of the Custodian Guard, was considered an equal of the Primarchs themselves in matters of blade work, when any custodian could be as skilled as this." Now, mind you, I'm not saying that Constantin Valdor could defeat Jagatai Khan in a duel, but to even be compared to such mighty warriors as the Khan, Lion, Wolf, and Angel is impressive to say the very least. But getting back to the history of this great warrior, records of his existence predate any of the Primarch's creation, as with many of the Legio Custodes, who were the Emperor's firstborn genetically augmented warriors. Yet for all of his power, Valdor was made and trained to serve a different and far more focused purpose, that of Lord Commander of the Custodian Guard. And to Valdor, the petty concerns of conquest and glory, dominion and victory, were as nothing when compared to his own sworn duty.
Too bad.
Pardon?
Well, I think it would have been interesting if the Emperor had given him a fleet of his own. Wonder what would have happened. You think he would have done well?
I honestly don't know. Just simply because of everything I've read about Constantine's character is very fixated on protecting the Emperor. So if the Emperor had given him a fleet and said, "Good luck, have fun storming the castle," or
I think he'd be a little bit out of depth.
I think he could do it. I just don't know how long it would take him anyways to refocus, or even if he could refocus.
Yeah.
Now, mind you, anyways, if he's genetically, if he hadn't been so genetically altered to just be solely focused on protecting the Emperor, who knows? He could have been great at it. He could have been so good anyways that the Emperor could have taken one look at that and it's like, I could just use 18 more of, I could just clone 18 more of him. We don't need any Primarchs. But like I said, the way that he is designed and the way that he is written about, I don't think he would do well as that, because I don't think he could get past the fact anyways. It's like, well, I shouldn't be here. I should be protecting the emperor. But that's my thoughts. What do you think?
So kind of like if you took somebody who had spent their entire life being trained how to use a computer and said, here, go out into the world, try fighting with a sword for a while. That's what about their depth.
I think it would be more like anyways if somebody had been training their entire life, like for instance on a Macintosh, and then you gave them a PC and said, I need you to, do some reports or whatever. I think it would take them a while to figure out how to use it. I think that eventually the similarities anyways are there and they'd eventually be able to figure it out, but there would be a learning curve. I don't think anyways that Conquest and what Valdor did anyways are so different anyways as the way that you're explaining, I guess, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Well, anyways, Valdor's value to the emperor was so much more than a mere combatant. From the earliest days of the Unification Wars, Constantin Valdor was the emperor's staunch companion, and his loyalty to the master of mankind was absolute. The captain general would rather have taken his own life than risk that of the emperor. Valdor's devotion to his master was such that there was no act he would not perform, no deed he would not consider to ensure the emperor's continual survival. So while Constantin Valdor held a rank in some ways higher than even that of a Primarch and sat at the center of the imperial power on Terra, he seldom exercised his influence, save where his purview was directly concerned, and then never with ambition or aggrandizement. But should his purpose be challenged, or worse yet, should anyone or anything seek to endanger the emperor or his chosen representatives, Valdor was as a demigod of vengeance, made incarnate, unstoppable and unrelenting. Now, speaking of the Unification Wars, this is the first recording of Valdor and his brothers, the Custodes, now they come to think about it. Yet, it is rumored that Valdor was part of the emperor's entourage even before the Custodes were formed, a trusted companion and bodyguard to the master of mankind. In the Unification Wars, he is noticed in the history books in a few particular accounts, first being the Battle of Moulin-Sin, also known as the Battle of the Red Frost. This was an epic campaign between the emperor's newly created proto-Astartes of the Thunder Warriors, a small cadre of custodians led by Constantin Valdor, and the forces of the priest king of the Moulin-Sin Confederacy of the Nordic Hives. Although outnumbered nearly 7-1, the imperial forces were able to defeat the horde of genetically altered warriors, which mocked men and zealots of the priest king, who was captured by the custodians. After the battle, the priest king was executed by the emperor himself, yet there is speculation that perhaps a custode took the head of the priest king and presented it to the emperor. Unfortunately, Valdor was also present at the Battle of Mount Ararat. Constantin had the disreputable honor of slaughtering all the Thunder Warriors after the battle was won to make way for the Astartes. Yet the chronicling I find most interesting is the assassination he carried out on Koju Zu. Now, sometime during the early years of the Great Crusade, Constantin Valdor was assigned the dire task of personally carrying out the assassination of Koju Zu, the minister of the Anatan Steppes, who had committed an unforgivable crime in the eyes of the emperor.
What was it?
Pardon?
What was her unforgivable sin?
I'm getting there.
Oh, sorry. Please continue.
As the emperor's imperium had expanded out into the stars during the Great Crusade, millions of pilgrims had begun to flock to humanity's birth world, wishing only to see their ancestral Earth with their very own eyes. It was said that unsettled land on the throne world was already the most valuable commodity in the nascent imperium, but this was not so. Only one resource was far more precious: water. Minister Zu was put to death for the crime of stealing water. For this act, and this act alone, her other treacheries were meaningless in the emperor's eyes. Her cleansing programs, her trade in forbidden flesh, the army of gene-worked detrituses and ministers had sequestered in the bunkers beneath the Germanic steppes. The prospect of her rebellion was never a threat to the Pax Imperialis. Her crimes of apostasy were nothing. She was to die for the sin of her harvester machines drinking the last ocean. Carrying out the minister's execution, Valdor claimed her young son, who would later be known as Ra Edminian, to induction into the Legio Custodes. Now, as the Great Crusade wore on, he took part in many events that we have already spoken of, such as the Council of Nicaea. While he was there, he remained impartial to the council, taking neither side of the argument about psychers and librarians. As far as he was concerned, he was only there to protect the Emperor of Man, standing faithfully by his side through the entire meeting. He was also alongside Leman Russ during the burning of Prospero, where it is said that he faced over 30 of Magnus the Red's elite blade masters, warriors who could predict their enemies' attacks through psychic precognition, slaying them all and receiving only a single wound in the process. I must mention that while Constantin Valdor did participate in the fighting, he viewed the whole culling of the Thousand Sons as a waste, and only took part in earnest with the slaughter when the Thousand Sons showed their true colors as vile sorcerers. Now, fast forward to the final Titanic siege on Terra, where the Legio Custodes fought alongside the Loyalist legions to defend the Emperor and his palace. They showed no mercy to the turncoat Space Marines. They did not waver, even as megatons of explosive death rained from the burning skies, even as demonic abominations spilled through the veil of reality, and Chaos Titans hammered the palace walls with city-leveling weaponry. Valdor and his 10,000 fought valiantly during this nightmarish battle, driving back one offensive after another. The Captain General was seen to reave through the ranks of the traitor legions as easily as their loyalist cousins would against ordinary humans and lesser Xenos. During this final battle of the Horus Heresy, the unthinkable would happen. At the culmination of the siege of Terra, the Emperor led a last-ditch boarding action against Horus's battle barge, the Vengeful Spirit, where he met the arch-traitor in single combat and defeated him at the last. But the cost was appalling. Though they cut down traitors and demons beyond count, Valdor and his fellow Legio Custodes were unable to prevent Horus from mortally wounding the Emperor, and leaving his father's mind and soul trapped in a shattered husk of his body. Grief-stricken, the custodians bore their master back to Terra, there to be interred forever within the machineries of the Golden Throne. They swore a penitent oath and donned the mourning black, consigning themselves to watching over their fallen lord for the rest of time. Now, following the failure of the War Master's assault upon Terra, the Emperor's surviving loyal sons led a furious war of vengeance, which came to be known as the Great Scouring, in which they hounded the fleeing traitor legions across the galaxy. Yet the newly reorganized Adeptus Custodes took no part in this time of violent catharsis and retribution, standing their somber watch upon the throne world and contemplating their ultimate failure. Though records conflict as how and when, it is during this period that Captain General Constantin Valdor disappeared from the Imperial histories, along with his weapons and armor, which never made their way to the Hall of Armaments. The Custodians elected Valdor's successor from amongst their ranks and continued their watch. Now, some wonder what happened to the mighty bodyguard of the Emperor, and while there have been many thoughts recorded and speculated on, the most intriguing I found is by a woman named Elizabeth Bequin, who identified the King in Yellow as Constantin Valdor.
Who?
Believed by some to be a figure of mere folk legend. The legend of the king and his inner circle known as the Eight have existed for many centuries. He is an enemy of both Gregor Eisenhorn and Gideon Ravenor, who have battled him for many years. The king's identity and purpose are unknown, except that it involves the Immaterium. Apparently, one of his goals is to obtain the true name of the emperor in order to obtain power over it. And this has led him in searches from the planet of the sorcerers to Sicarius, to the Black Library. Eisenhorn has pledged to hunt down and destroy the king before he completes his ultimate objective. Besides the Cognitai, the King in Yellow has amassed an army of clone blanks, winged space marines similar to Komos, and possibly custodians, which to me is intriguing. The reason I mention this is because Elizabeth Bequin, after entering the pocket dimension known as the City of Dust, was nearly taken before the King in Yellow, but she used Annuncia to escape. Bequin and her own entourage recovered a book whose entire contents were a single name, which was apparently the identity of the King in Yellow. The first words in the book were Constantin Valdor. Well, before we talk about our next person, what do you think of Valdor? There, Yuxin?
As a person himself, and this is probably true with a lot of the Custodes, is he has a very blank slate side to him. I mean, he's been through all these major events, and yet at the same time, he just sort of has this same kind of continuous aspect about him that doesn't really change much. Like, in comparison, let's say Lehman Russ, how he changes from being kind of arrogant to being more understanding, more empathetic.
You're saying he doesn't have any character development?
Yeah, he really doesn't.
From a lot, I've read a little bit about a little bit more up on him, anyways, this time around, talking about him, and he's interesting because it seems like he really tries to have character development. It's just like I mentioned before, anyways. I mean, especially with the Custodes, they're all kind of programmed to feel no emotion, no remorse, no nothing. I mean, it seems like there are times, anyways, where he wants to. He starts to kind of branch out just very, very minutely. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that, anyways, when he's like on the siege of Terra, he because he's put in a different position than he normally is. Because remember, the Emperor is doing the whole thing the web way, and he's left Constantin, Valdor, and Malcador out there, anyways, to make sure things are going swimmingly with Dorn. So he's like we just kind of talked about, anyways. He's put in a position, anyways, where it's not something he's not used to doing.
Right.
So he starts having to make his own decisions, and you kind of see, anyways, that he starts to become a little bit more personable, I guess. More, or dare I say, even almost human. But it's still, anyways, like
They get sucked back in.
Minute. It's very minute, anyways. It's almost like, there you go, buddy. Attaboy. Keep it up. And then, all chaos spreads. And
They get sucked back in because he has to fight next to the Emperor again.
Yeah. But like I said, it's like he really tries. It's just, he's just genetically altered so much. And that's what I was saying last week. That's one of the problems I have with the Custodes. They're like the Space Marines, where they're genetically altered not to care. But the Custodes are even more. They're more purposed, anyways, in what they're doing, like being the bodyguard of the Emperor. The fact that they can't even like raise a hand or an objection against the Emperor is just it's frustrating. But what do you think of him, anyways? Other than as a warrior and whatnot, I think he's.
I think he was a good warrior, from what I know, an excellent warrior.
I mean, the fact that he's being compared to Primarchs in combat prowess means that he was pretty good. Just saying. Do I think, anyways, that like I said, do I think that he could beat Jagatai Khan in a duel? No, I don't.
No way on earth.
But do I think he would have a good showing of himself and last pretty long? Yeah, I think he was that good. But like I said, I don't think he would beat Jagatai Khan. I don't know if he could beat any of the Primarchs. Maybe Lorgar.
before he unleashed himself from his psychic powers.
Yeah, before he hooked out. Yeah, I think he probably could. But who's the next guy we're talking about?
Would be Trajan Volaris. I'd like to start with a quote of his: "The hotter the forge, the finer the blade," or so they say. The forge of war in which we now find ourselves blazes hotter than anything the Imperium has seen in 10 millennia. We of the Adeptus Custodes were built to endure these fires. They will not be our end. Instead, we will be honed to the finest cutting edge, that we may be the bane of even the foulest heretics. Now, Volaris is an imposing and cold man with a severely scarred face. At the time of the 13th Black Crusade, Captain General Trajan Volaris was considered to be perhaps the deadliest individual warrior in the entire Imperium, with his combat prowess approaching that of the Primarchs of old. Volaris' name is spoken of nothing short of reverence, for many consider the Captain General to be the personal representative of the Emperor himself. Even the High Lords of Terra might be mocked when in wine or in anger. But to do so with the Captain General was simply beyond imagination. To mock Valoris was to mock the Emperor himself. Such blasphemy would not go unpunished, and would inevitably result in a transgressor's untimely demise. Valoris is the current Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes. Now, as you hinted at with Constantin Valdor, the Captain General of the Custodes, is more than the leader of the Custodes. So I figured I might explain what this role actually entails.
That sounds good. All right. What is the Captain General?
Okay, so the office of Captain General is one of the most powerful military appointments in the Imperium of Man. It confers full responsibility for the overall defense of the Sol system, Terra, the Imperial Palace, and ultimately, the Golden Throne and the Emperor himself. The Captain General is not just the master of the Adeptus Custodes, they also serve as an important member of the Senatorum Imperialis, and one of the ruling High Lords of the Imperium. However, throughout Imperial history, few Captain Generals have chosen to exercise this right, preferring to focus solely on the duties to the Emperor rather than Imperial politics. He is further charged with leading the greatest military campaigns fought by the 10,000, and must display a degree of warrior prowess that approaches that of the Primarchs of old. In the millennia since the Great Crusade, there have been just 17 incumbents of this weighty mantle. Most have died in battle, either on the holy soil of Terra or whilst leading crucial campaigns amidst the stars. Several have become eyes of the Emperor, while 3, including Constantin Valdor himself, the first and greatest of their number, simply vanished, their disappearances wreathed in mystery even amongst their own comrades. Many claim that he is the greatest warrior to hold the title since the Emperor bestrode the stars. Within the first solar decade of service, Volaris ran not just 1, but 2 successful blood games, a record that remains unbroken.
Pardon me, Yuxin, but what are the blood games?
The blood games are an exercise practiced by the Adeptus Custodes through which members of the Custodes act as enemy combatants and attempt to penetrate the security of the Imperial Palace on Terra. This enables the Custodes to anticipate an enemy's moves and constantly update and adapt their security measures to ensure the Golden Throne remains unharmed. The original inspiration for the blood games may have come from the Palace coup.
Which one?
Huh?
There have been many attempted coups. Oh, which one?
Oh, this is the one that took place before the Imperial Palace was even finished. It's really quite interesting. You see, the conspiracy was led by Grand Provost Marshal Uoma Kandaware, Thunder Warrior Primarch Ushatan, and Biotechnical Division Head Amar Astarte. The conspirators intended to remove Constantin Valdor from power and put him on trial for the massacre of the Thunder Warriors at Mount Ararat, without consent of the High Lords of Terra. They did not intend to oust the Emperor, but rather intended to let him have the final judgment on Valdor's fate. However, this was only the true goal of Kandaware. Amar Astarte had grown to believe the Primarch project and raising of the legions Astartes doomed without the Primarchs available, while Ushatan simply sought revenge for his betrayed warrior's death. The conspirators drew upon a variety of forces, from mercenaries to soldiers of fortune to Imperial Army units loyal to Kandaware. At their core were Thunder Warriors under Ushatan and Amars Astartes Castellan exemplars, genetically engineered to be loyal only to her. With the still under construction Imperial Palace sparsely populated, and the Emperor busy with other projects, the conspirators expected they would be able to topple the regime inside the complex and arrest Valdor. Initially, they met with great success and swept aside minimal loyalist army units with little effort. However, inside the incomplete Great Chamber of the Senatorum Imperialis, Ushatan, Kandaware, and his Thunder Warriors were confronted by a lone custodian in the form of Constantin Valdor. Valdor urged them to surrender, and when the conspirators refused, Captain General unleashed the Angels of Death in what would be their first live combat engagement. 10,000 warriors of the First Legion, only recently out of training, emerged and used their superior teamwork and discipline to mow down the savage Thunder Warriors and army units with their new bolt gun weapons. Now, allegedly, Alferis was among these troops, disguised as regular space marine.
Of course he was. I'm Alfarius.
Amid the carnage, Valdor and Ushitan dueled, with the Captain General eventually slaying the Thunder Warriors Primarch. Before Ushitan died, he expressed his regret that Valdor was numb to all emotion and humanity. Meanwhile, Amara Astartes journeyed into the Imperial dungeon to destroy her lab and end the Legion's Astartes project forever. She is confronted by the custodian Simonis, but the warrior was unable to prevent her from causing a catastrophic explosion that engulfed the lab and herself. Simonis survived, but all of the genetic lore on the Primarchs was apparently lost. In truth, the Emperor had foreseen Astartes' treachery and had made backup copies of her data and samples and hidden them away elsewhere. Ultimately, the coup was doomed from the very start, and the Custodes were well aware of its planning even before it began. Surprisingly, Candoar was granted amnesty and allowed to retire peacefully on Terra outside the walls of the palace. The destroyed Imperial dungeon, meanwhile, was cleared for use as the nexus of the Webway project. Malcador returned to Terra shortly after the conspiracy had been put down, apparently having been on Luna preparing for the imminent assault there with the Emperor.
Interesting.
Yes, but after this attempt, Constantin Valdor recommended that the custodians hold war games to keep them on their toes. Now, speaking of Alfarius,
again?
in the writings of Mike Brooks Alfarius, head of the Hydra, there is an account by Alfarius that states that he helped inspire the Blood Games during the early Great Crusade. At that time, Alfarius purposefully infiltrated the Imperial Palace, slew and stole the identity of Custodian Garudo, and ultimately managed to override one of the palace's defense turrets with the theoretical ability to shoot the Emperor's shuttle out of the sky. Despite explaining his infiltration to Valdor, it took further prompting from Malcador before Valdor started the Blood Games in earnest. By the way, this is the point where we've briefly mentioned the fight between Valdor and Alfarius. It's this particular event that happened.
Right. This is also, anyways, all said, anyways, by Alfarius. And that is a lie. So,
maybe.
Who knows? Who knows?
It being a lie, maybe a lie. The game changed after the Horus Heresy when a specialized corps was charged with recovering suitable subjects, including Chaos Space Marines, from across the Imperium to release within the palace as part of the Blood Games to test the Adeptus Custodes abilities in real conditions, as most never left the palace themselves.
Houston?
Yes?
I thought you were going to be talking about Trajan.
Right. Now getting back to Trajan. With his remarkable grasp of battlefield strategy and his naturally aggressive streak, he earned a place for himself amongst the Volaris custodians. There, Volaris won many names from deeds such as the destruction of the Space Hulk Mournful Siren, the defeat of the Genestealer cult of the Emperor's Writhing Shadow, and his spearheading of the preemptive strike against Crushed Fist. If Valoris showed a weakness, it was his reluctance to stand back and wait for his enemies to come to him. He lasted only 22 Terran years amongst the companions before his desire to participate in a more proactive strategy of defense saw him reassigned. He gained the rank of shield captain soon afterwards and spent several standard centuries leading sorties against emergent threats throughout the Sol system and beyond. Valoris became well known for his tendency to observe his enemies carefully, predict their movements, then deliver a sudden and decisive blow. He cultivated networks of agents and informers across the Segmentum Solar, and even further out into the wider Imperium. Valoris recognized his own proclivity for aggressive action and took constant steps to temper it with comprehensive foreknowledge. Thus, his strikes always fell where they should, and no comrade was ever lost to reckless commands. Though the Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes traditionally served among the High Lords of Terra only under the most dire circumstances, such as during the War of the Beast in the mid-32nd millennium, it was only the persistence of Lev Tyron, the Chancellor of the Senatorum Imperialis at the time of the 13th Black Crusade in 999.M41, that persuaded Volaris to assume the seat among the High Lords that had been left vacant for some time following the death of Lord Brack, the Chancellor of the State Imperium. It was the Chancellor's hope that Volaris would agree to serve as one of the High Lords, which would swing the vote to abolish the Lex Imperialis, the binding legal code of the Imperium, and allow for the Adeptus Custodes to finally leave Terra en masse, in order to take the fight to the forces of chaos. Trajan Valoris has proven a dynamic and effective Captain General. Under his rule, the number of blood games has increased tenfold. The defenses of the stable warp routes into the Sol system have been strengthened, and long-hidden cults have been purged from the Terran underhives. Little escapes the eyes of his ever-expanding spy network, and, armed with certainty of the truly righteous, his covert strikes have annihilated dozens of threats to the Golden Throne. Following the destruction of the fortress world of Cadia and the formation of the galaxy-wide warp rift known as the Great Rift, a bow wave of immaterium swept over the worlds of the Sol system, including the throne world itself. This allowed a large host of coordinate demons to burst through the skein of reality to assail Terra itself, in a conflict that came to be known as the Battle of Lion's Gate, or informally as the Second Battle of Terra. Enacting the catastrophe protocols, Valoris acted as the overall commander of the Imperial forces charged with the defense of the Imperial Palace. Captain General personally led a charge of 4,000 custodians from the Lion's Gate to meet the invaders. They fought alongside the resurrected Primarch Guilliman and his forces, newly arrived from Luna in the wake of the Terran Crusade, and successfully managed to blunt the Blood God's attempts at striking the heart of the Imperium. Following this dire campaign, the High Lords voted to suspend the dictates of the Lex Imperialis, which allowed the Adeptus Custodes to sally forth from the throne world, take part in Guilliman's subsequent Indominus Crusade, and to take the fight directly to the servants of the ruinous powers. At the Battle of Gathalamor during the Crusade, Valoris led a combined force of custodians and Grey Knights under the command of Grandmaster Aldrich Voldus against the Wordbearers heretic Custodes and their summoned demon allies to cleanse that sacred cardinal world of the Ecclesiarch of the Chaos Taint. So, what do you think of this mighty warrior, Zekthar?
Well, he's not Valdor. I don't know. I think Valdor is an unfair measuring stick, in my opinion. But that's also because I know a whole lot more about Valdor than I do about Trajan. He seems though kind of like a chip off the old block for the Custodes.
He seems to be more flexible though than Valdor. I mean, he's willing to use alternative sources other than just the Custodes to get the resources he needs to win.
Well, okay, there's two things anyways. One is that I think anyways I think he's definitely more aggressive than Valdor was. He seems more proactive in trying to like exterminate things. But I mean the whole thing he's saying anyways, Valdor wasn't willing to use other resources. He helped defend Terra with multiple different Space Marine legions. Fought with the Sisters of Silence. I mean, I disagree with that. Not only that, but I think anyways that there's one thing though that Valdor doesn't have to deal with or there's one thing Valdor had to deal with that Trajan doesn't. A walking, talking emperor telling him what to do. Trajan doesn't have that. Trajan gets the ability anyways to go, well, I think this is a good idea. What do you think, Chief? If you agree with me, say nothing. It always works. He gets to do whatever he wants.
And what I meant by alternate resources, I meant things like actually having a spy network or.
Oh, well, that was a lot of that also had to do with the fact that it wasn't really Valdor's department when you have someone like Malkador the Sigillite, who was like the Grand Master of Spies, that worked and talked with you continually. So he didn't really need a network of spies. He would just go, "Hey, Malkador, what's going on this planet?" And Malkador would be like, "Give me 20 minutes." And then he'd have a dossier with all the stuff anyways that Valdor needed. He didn't need a spy network, is what I'm saying. Because he had Malkador. Yeah, another thing, anyways, that Trajan never had to worry about. Because, Malkador was kind of, the Grand Master of Spies. He still was kind of, the frustrating part about Malkador, too, is that he kind of deemed what information he wanted to give you. A lot of times. Dorn found that out the hard way.
Yeah.
We talked about that. When we were talking about, I believe it was the Word Bearers. Oh, Vulcan's been here the entire time Sanguinius has. What? He's been here 3 months and no one's told me? We didn't think it was important.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Malkador. But ironically, though, Malkador did confine with Valdor a whole lot more than he actually did even with the Primarchs, which is kind of saying something too. But, right, Trajan. I think Trajan, though, definitely is significantly more aggressive with how he does things. Like I said, I think one of the benefits is that he doesn't have anybody to tell him what to do, pretty much, other than Rabute Gilman, obviously. But, and even then, anyways, if he really didn't want to do something, I don't know if Gilman could actually stop him, other than actually literally putting him down. But, because I don't think that Gilman actually has any authority over the Custodes.
I don't think
he works with them, but I don't, and they work with him because he's, the son of the Emperor, but I don't know if they necessarily, he has any authority over him. Does he?
I don't think so.
Other than, as Hellboy eloquently said it anyways, Five-Finger Mary.
Okay.
You'll do what I say. You don't have any authority over us. My fist says that I do. That's the way we're going with it. Okay. So, yeah, so he's got a whole lot more leeway and room that he can actually move around than Valdor did.
Do you think that that's made him actually be able to inherit more knowledge and more experience outwards than being hyper-focused like Valdor had to be?
I think, like I said, anyways, I think the concept of the Emperor not really being there, in spirit he's there, but, actually not being there anyways, yes, I think that you'll see Trajan, as he gets older anyways, continually grow anyways more into something that is less custody than Valdor was, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think, well, he's already doing it anyways. He's going on crusades. That's something Valdor never did. He's crusading, Euxin. He's crusading. So,
well, Valdor did too. It was just with the Emperor, not with.
Oh yeah, good point. Yeah, and he went with Lehman Russ and he was Prospero, but that was wasn't really a crusade. That was a butt whooping. But he seems to have a little bit more of a like I said, he seems far more aggressive than Valdor was because he has the ability to. And like I think I agree with you too. Anyways, is that just the aspect that he'll get farther anyways in life because he doesn't have to worry about
He'll be able to be more human.
Yeah,
more human, Victor. More human. You'll actually have comebacks.
Yeah, he might actually have a quick quip of a comeback. Yes, by the time he's done, it'll only take him 800 years to figure it out. But But we got to kind of press on. The next guy I picked was also during the heresy, and that was Diocletian Coros, who was a prefect of the Legio Custodes during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy in the 30th and early 31st millennium. He was part of the member of the Custodians' Hakatoya caste. Not much is known of Diocletian's past, but most of what I could find starts with the Horus Heresy during the War of the Webway. He fought for 5 Terran years in the war within the Webway, and as mighty as the Sisters of Silence and the Custodes were, things began to go badly for the Imperial forces, as the never-ending hordes of demons threatened to breach the sanctity of the palace's dungeons, and spill it onto the surface of the throne world itself. Diocletian Koros was charged with organizing a fresh wave of imperial forces to resist the encroaching forces of chaos, which included the condemned prisoners of the fallen imperial night house Viridian, who would aid the beleaguered imperial forces at Calistar, also known as the Impossible City, just as the Chaos Hordes began to overrun it. As events turned dire for the defending imperial forces, the emperor himself was finally able to leave the confines of the Golden Throne, following the sacrifice of 1,000 psychers in order to cover the retreat of the decimated imperial forces and to confront the foul demonic entity known as Draconian. During this battle, Diocletian fought at the side of both Ra Edminion and the emperor, and eventually fought his way back to Terra and escaped the confines of the imperial webway, just before the emperor sealed the portal, effectively ending the war within the webway. Now, following the battle, the emperor began to show Diocletian visions of both his and Terra's past, much as he had done with Ra.
Who?
Oh, you remember. He was the guy he infused with Draconian and had him go skipping down the webway.
Oh, yeah. That poor guy.
Yes. Well, after this unfortunate event, Diocletian was raised to the status of tribune, following Ra's disappearance in the webway. But to me, what makes this man interesting is what he did after the Horus Heresy. Now, taking some time, Diocletian Koros wrote down his accounts of the War of the Webway, as well as other events he was part of during the Horus Heresy, along with some of the vivid dreams that the emperor gave him. Now, to a custodian, dreams do not mean the same as they do to others. During their ordinary lives, custodians do not dream at all, for something in their psyche changes after their transformation, and whatever purpose dreaming has for the mortal psyche is made redundant by the altercation. But there were exceptions, legendary ones. They were spoken of carefully, reverently, for it was the form of dreams long ago that the emperor's will was made most clearly manifest to his custodians. Diocletian Koros would pen his seminal work, The Master of Mankind, sometime after the end of the Horus Heresy, a copy of which would still be read by the Adeptus Custodes some 10 millennia later. It detailed many of the interactions with the emperor, including the visions and dreams he believed the Master of Mankind had given him. While these dreams I personally find to be mildly amusing, to me the far more fascinating part of the tome is his recording of history during the time. He doesn't hold anything back, nor does he try to make himself into a hero or those around him. He simply plugs the facts, which I find admirable. It also gives a glimpse into the psyche of the Custodes, showing us that they have even lost more of their humanity than their cousins, the Space Marines. With the exception of Valdor, but that's just, like we mentioned before, just barely. One of my favorite examples of this is a conversation between a human boy, Diocletian himself, and a blood angel. And I quote, "Both warriors snapped to mechanical halts as two figures manifested before them. Diocletian's spear was free in a blur of ruthless precision, leveled down across one of the refugees' throats. Its keen edge sang with a soft metallic chime from cutting the air so swiftly. Sacred unity! Zephyr hissed the curse across the box. What are you doing? Diocletian looked down into the wide eyes of a young boy, no more than 7 or 8 Terran Standard years old. The figure at the youth's side was an even more diminutive, a girl. The boy's sister by the uniformity in skin tone and facial structure, a year or two younger. Diocletian had no talent for estimating the age of unmodified humans. She looked up at the custodian with wide, terrified eyes. A scream sounded from the crowd, the plaintive cry of their mother. Both children's mouths were wide, their lips shaking. Diocletian lifted his blade away from the boy's throat and reactivated his helm's mouth grill to speak loud.
My apologies,
he said with grave formality. The children flinched at the rawness of his vox-altered tones. Zephyr moved slowly, reaching up to remove his own helm. He stood bareheaded before the two children as their mother reached him. The boy, resisting his mother's attempts to hurt him, tore free and stood before Diocletian once more. Are you the emperor? Diocletian stood motionless.
Is that a jest?
He asked, making the boy flinch at the tone. Zephyr's smile was bittersweet as he looked down upon the boy. He lowered himself slowly, his red warplate grinding loudly through the motion, until he was on one knee before the child. Even then, he was still thrice the boy's height. No, child, the blood angel replied. He is not the emperor, though he knows the Emperor very well. Tears ran from the edges of the boy's eyes. The immensity of the armored giants before him filled his senses. From the assault of overwhelming gold and red to the thrum of the active battle plate, awe was writ plain across his young features. Awe and desperation, and an expression of fearful need. Diocletian would have voxed his irritation had Xephon not been wearing his helm to hear it. Xephon was blind and deaf to the custodian's annoyance, or simply chose to ignore it. What is your name, young one? Derek. Derek. My name is Xephon, and as grand as my companion appears, he is not the Emperor. What is wrong, child? I wanted to ask the Emperor when we can go home. My parents are still there. We left them behind. We had to get to the evacuation ships. Diocletian glanced to the woman protecting the little girl. Not their mother, then. Her facial structures bore the signs of familial resemblance, so there was some genetic linkage. An aunt or older cousin, perhaps. He removed the target lock playing over her filthy face, dismissing it along with his cursory interest. Xephon wasn't compelled to move on. I see, the blood angel said. And what world do you call home? Blaze. We're from Blaze. Xephon nodded, as if he knew the world well. Diocletian doubted that any of the Ninth Legion had ever set foot upon it. Useless backwater that it was. Then you have traveled far. Welcome to Terra, Derek. You're safe here. Safe for now, Diocletian added silently. What were your parents' trades? If they were fighting, they must have been soldiers. The boy nodded. They were fighting the gray machine men from Mars. My parents were warriors as well, said Xephon, neglecting to mention that they had died over a century ago on the radiation-choked deserts of Baal's second moon. Their ashes would be nothing more than blight dust on the wasteland winds by now. The boy, Derek, turned his eyes upon Diocletian. Are your parents soldiers?
No,
said Diocletian.
They are long dead. My mother was a slave who died of intestinal flux, and my father was a barbarian king executed by the emperor's own hand for opposing the principles of unity.
The what?
I finished speaking with you.
Derek narrowed his eyes at Diocletian before returning his gaze to Xephon. I want to go back for my parents. I want to ask the Emperor to send the Space Marines. The Emperor could send you, couldn't he? He could, and perhaps he will. I will ask him of his plans for Blaze the next time I stand before him. The hope in the boy's eyes made Diocletian's gorge rise. He was all too aware for the many eyes upon them at the heart of this ludicrous exchange.
Our duty awaits.
Indeed. Now, Derek, I must do my duty to the Emperor. Thank you for taking the time to speak with me. The boy nodded, mute. Xephon replaced his helm. His voice emerged through the harsh, drawling rasp of the Vox grill. Look after your sister, Derek. Derek moved to his aunt and sister, the latter weeping softly after the scare Diocletian had given her. Diocletian walked on with Xephon at his side. If the refugee herd's stairs had been an irritant before, they were practically boring through the custodian's armor now.
You're a creature of pointless sentiment.
Diocletian voxed to his new companion. I find it interesting that we have discussed many of the Space Marine chapters, some losing much of their humanity, at least compassion for humanity, such as the Black Templars and Ultramarines, to some of, in our opinions, the closest you can get to human Astartes. But the way the custodians treat humanity in the tome of the Master of Mankind makes Iron Fists look like St. Nicholas. What are your thoughts on this, Euxin?
I think Diocletian's a dick.
That's pretty frank. I have spoken. Just leaves.
I'm done.
Yeah. Well,
I'll tell you the horrors of what my family's been like.
So it's just, by the way, one of the few Space Marine chapters that we will actually be getting to. In fact, Dig Pig, anyways, our newest member, he wants us actually to talk about the Blood Angels. So after we're done with Collins month, we will be talking about the Blood Angels. But they're also kind of up there, anyways. Along with, from what I've read and heard, anyways, they're very much like the Salamanders, Space Wolves. They're significantly more compassionate, ironically, because they're also vampires. But That's actually one of the reasons why they're as compassionate as they are, is because um, they know anyways that they're not like all that much superior to humanity because they still have this huge defect. So it kind of brings it humbles them. It's probably the best way of describing it. But just the fact, anyways, that you've got this guy, anyways, who just has no emotion whatsoever, really honestly thinks of humanity as just like
Dirt.
dirt or gene stock, pretty much. It's like you could become better until you're an adult and then you can't do anything, kind of thing. And then you pair him up with somebody, anyways, that actually shows, actually, right here, anyways, it's actually kind of cool because that's even more compassion you normally hear from a space marine giving us a small child. So just the comparison between the two, you're just sitting there going, God, you're just the worst, I mean, and I didn't throw it in here, but there, like I said, Diocletian, that's just kind of also his character too. He's the guy, anyways. Like I mentioned, that he needed to go get reinforcements for the webway, and so his concept was just like, well, let's just throw as many humans as we possibly can at it. And Doran's like, we can't do that because we know what happens, anyways. Afterwards, you're going to want to kill them all because they saw all the demons coming out of the warp or coming out of the hole in the basement, kind of thing. And they're like, his response is just kind of like, who cares? They're just meat sacks, kind of thing. And Tort's like, excuse me? And he's like, you've done this before, anyways, with your, you've done this before with your own space marines, your own sons. Why won't you do this with humanity? He's like, because I'm the general of the Imperial Fists. They are a coin that I can use. And I'm normally in the thick of it with them. So and I still don't throw away their lives heedlessly. So thankfully, anyways, Malkador kind of got in the middle of it. He's like, I have a suggestion. And he gave them the those knights that I talked about, that the disgraced race of knights or whatever. No one knows what happened to them either. After this, they helped, and then they disappeared after the Horus Heresy. They don't get really talked about. But yeah, Diocletian. But like I said, anyways, that's one of the things I find interesting about his recordings. Is just the aspect that he does not care, anyways, what you think of him. So, like you said, anyways, like, this guy's a dick. It's like, well, guess who actually wrote that whole conversation out? Diocletian. So it's like, he's just like, okay, you can think of me that way. I really don't care. Especially coming from you. It's gonna see the response. The only person he seems to really care about, anyways, is obviously, anyways, Valdor at the time, and then the Emperor. And that's about it. Everybody else is just kind of like, well, suck an egg, I found him to be kind of interesting. He's an interesting dick. Let's put it that way. But we got time for one more person. Who else are we going to talk about? I'm assuming you picked somebody from the 41st millennium instead of the Horus Heresy.
Yes, I chose Valerian.
Oh, cool.
Valerian is a Depus Custodes shield captain within the Hykenatoi's Pelagian chamber during the 13th Black Crusade. While taking part in a blood game during the Crusade's 5th year, he was asked by the Hateran Guards Tribune, Heraclion, to join their order. This was a great honor for Valerian, as he had long strived to join the Companions, and prepared himself to face the Hateran Guard's first trial. It seemed simple enough, as he had to simply enter the chamber of the Golden Throne that held the Emperor. But after catching a glimpse of the Master of Mankind, Valerian's body froze and would not obey him. This caused him to fail the trial, and Valerian was left ashamed and embarrassed as he was returned to his former duties of guarding the Imperial Palace's outer walls. He later aided in the palace's defense as mayhem swept across Terra in the aftermath of the Great Rift's creation. Valerian was part of the 4,000 Custode warriors, which took part in the Second Battle of Terra against the forces of Khorne, during which he met the Sister of Silence, Tanau Alea. Valerian, Alea, and several sisters and a squad of Grey Knights managed to take down a bloodthirster in the battle. As they were about to be overwhelmed, Captain General Trajan Volaris led a charge from the Lion's Gate that swept across the Chaos forces. Following the assault on Terra, Valerian agreed to join Alea in a bid to follow her captured Black Legion warp route map to take the fight to Chaos forces. Joined by a mixed force of 40 Sisters of Silence and 9 other Custodes, Valerian and Alea journeyed to Volaris aboard the Custode ship Shalandion. Once there, they found the world under assault from the Black Legion, which planned to drop a shard of Akkadian pylon onto the planet's surface to shut down all warp travel in the area and isolate Terra. Valerian, Alea, and their small band teleported aboard the Grand Cruiser Heartspite. At the center of the assault, fought their way to the pylon shard and in a desperate last stand prevented it from being dropped onto the planet. The entire force was slaughtered in the process, save for Valeria, Alea, and the Custodes Ujoma. All three were left badly wounded when Rabuti Gilman's fleet later arrived and defeated the Black Legion by seizing the Heartspite. Valerian and the other survivors were then rushed to Terra to receive priority medical care, and all three survived their wounds, though Ujoma was interred inside a Contemptor dreadnought. After he had recovered, Gilliman asked to meet with Valerian and thanked the shield captain for his heroic efforts. When Valerian learned that Gilliman planned on launching the Indominus Crusade, he asked to join and fight beside the Lord Commander. Gilliman, though, declined, stating that he would defer to Custodes Captain General Trajan Valoris's judgment that Valerian should stay to defend Terra. When the crusade launched, the throne world would need to look to its own forces to protect it. He did, however, want to honor Valerian in the tradition of Ultramar during a ceremony celebrating other worthy participants of the wars on Terra and Volaris. This would make Valerian an important symbol to the population of Terra, and while the shield captain's heart told him he should decline, Valerian ultimately accepted Gilliman's request. The shield captain took part in the ceremony alongside his comrade, the witch seeker Alea, and Gilliman himself presented and crowned Valerian with the laurel wreath taken from Ultramar. Then, before the adulating crowds, the Lord Commander proclaimed Valerian the hero of the Lion's Gate, an ancient honor used only once before, when Terra was invaded during the Horus Heresy. But not all those in the Custodes were happy by Valerian accepting the honor. However, and some now saw him as Gilliman's lackey. The shield captain, though, believed the Lord Commander's vision for the future of the Imperium, and Valerian was willing to become one of the symbols he needed to complete his grand task. Yet, not helping matters was the fact that Gilliman personally requested that Valerian head an investigation into the splintered cults that were wreaking havoc on Terra. Captain General Trajan Valoris agreed, and Valerian was given command of a group of Custodes, called the Argent Chamber, to aid him in his quest. Valerian's first act was to order an attack on the heretic Laxlan Screto, who was one of the cult's many leaders. The Custodes' intelligence stated that Screto's cult had laid claim to Terra's Gorgantha subsector and had repelled the 23rd Hejada Earth Guard's efforts to destroy them. This resistance ended, however, when Valerian led a direct strike at Screto's stronghold and killed the splintered forces defending it, before capturing the cult leader. Screto was then interrogated by the Custodes, and through him, they learned of many of the Splintered's other cult leaders, such as Figure de Flame and Lacrimosa and the Convolute. By then, the Imperial Fist captain Tor Garadon and his company had arrived to Terra aboard the Phalanx from the battlefield of Cadia. With his arrival, Captain General Trajan Valoris wished for Terra's population to see the Imperial Fist taking the fight to the Splintered. while the Custodes assumed their traditional role of being in the background. As such, he ordered that Valerian cede the leadership of the investigation to Tor Geridon, which the shield captain reluctantly did. After Valerian shared the information the heretic Scrato gave to them, Geridon decided to strike at the stronghold of the splintered cult leader known as the Convolute. With the combined might of the Custodes and Imperial Fists, the Convolute's heretic forces were easily killed. But even as his cult was being torn apart, the furious Convolute unleashed his powers and raved at Valerian that by attacking him they were only making his rival, the Lacrimosa, stronger. The Convolute was then quickly mortally wounded, but before the shield captain could kill him, the heretic was blown apart by a Minotaur's squadron that suddenly appeared. The squadron was then questioned by Valerian, but they refused to answer any of his questions due to the negative past encounters between the chapters. Captain Tor Geridon ordered the Minotaurs to leave immediately. The squadron refused, and the two chapters would have come to blows had Valerian and his Argent Chamber not placed themselves between the Space Marines. The shield captain then forced them both to stand down, and the Minotaurs left without explaining their actions or why they were on Terra. Afterwards, Valerian informed the Custodes of the Minotaurs' presence and their enmity with the Imperial Fists. With that duty done, the shield captain was left intrigued by the hatred in which the Convolute spoke of his rival, the Lacrimosa. Seeking to hunt her down, Valerian sought the aid of the Eye of the Emperor Kaluan to learn more about her. After gathering information through his spy network, however, Kaluan informed Valerian that the Lacrimosa was the weakest of the remaining splintered cult leaders. Nonetheless, Valerian felt compelled to search for her as he continued his efforts to destroy the splintered. During that time, Valerian was approached by his comrade, the Sister of Silence, Alea, who sought his aid in an investigation she was undertaking. As Custodes had battled the splintered Chaos cults, the Sister's Somnus Citadel stronghold was struck by a failed attempt to destroy it with a bomb-filled lander. Alea had then tracked down some of the culprits, but they were killed themselves or were murdered. She, however, found an auto-catechism device, which led her to believe the Imperial Church member known as Peter was behind the attack and asked Valerian if he knew who that was. After pouring through the device, the shield captain determined that Peter in the notes likely referred to the deposed ecclesiarch and High Lord Valdor Slist, who had been removed from power by Guilliman. Now that she finally had a target to go after, Alea asked Valerian to join in her hunt, but he refused due to his order to strike down the leadership of the splintered cults. Before she left, however, the shield captain gave Alea his Misericordia to wield against Slist. Soon after, the splintered took such heavy losses at the Minotaur's hands that the cults rallied under the leadership of Figar de Flame for a final stand in the Cathedral of the Emperor Defied. Valerian and the Argent Chamber were part of the Imperial forces sent to confront them, but all were surprised when the Minotaurs launched a sudden strike and destroyed the splintered cults. Afterwards, it was revealed that the Minotaurs were acting on behalf of the Hexarchy, a group of current deposed High Lords that sought to overthrow Guilliman's rule of the Imperium. They broadcasted the Splinter's defeat across Terra, showing that they, and not Guilliman, would restore order to the throne world. The Hexarchy then demanded that the High Lords loyal to Guilliman stand down and cede rule to Terra to them. The Hexarchy and the Loyalists, led by Captain General Volaris, then entered a stalemate as their terms were considered. But this was nearly undone due to a group of Sisters of Silence led by Alea. The former ecclesiarch Valdor Slist was a member of the Hexarchy, and she led her sisters into the cathedral to kill her long sought-after target, despite being heavily outnumbered. Captain General Volaris ordered Valerian, who was nearby, to stop her, and he led his Argent Chamber after Alea. Using the homing beacon on the Misericordia he had given her, Valerian was able to catch up to Alea's group just as they had begun to battle a squadron of Minotaurs that had discovered them. Valerian immediately led his forces to their aid, and both groups succeeded in killing the Minotaurs, though not without suffering losses. The shield captain then attempted to convince Aleia to withdraw, but she refused and instead asked him to join her in attacking Slist. Valerian ultimately relented and agreed to aid her, and both groups advanced onto Slist's position. It was then, however, that the traitor's High Lord, Felix, revealed that his loyalty to the Hexarchy's cause had been a ruse from the start. He was the Grand Master of Assassins, and after a signal was given, each of the Hexarchy's members were killed by Felix's well-placed assassins. Valerian at once realized that Captain General Volaris had used Aleia's attack as an excuse to get him into the cathedral so that the shield captain could ensure Felix's survival. Both the sisters and Custodes then raced to Felix's side and defended him from both the Astra Militarum regiments that had been tricked into aiding the Hexarchy, as well as the Minotaurs chapter. In the confusion that followed the Hexarchy's deaths, the two groups successfully did so, and eventually the Astra Militarum and Minotaurs obeyed orders to stand down from the loyalist High Lords. After the battle, Aleia visited Valerian to inform him she intended to keep the shield captain's Misericordia until she had made a worthy kill with it. When Valerian stated that meant their paths would cross again, Aleia told the shield captain he was likely right before she then departed for Luna. Valerian later met with Captain General Volaris, who informed him that not all of the Splintered had been destroyed, as they had originally thought. As most of the Splintered forces were being destroyed in the cathedral by the Minotaurs, the Lacrimosa's cult had escaped Terra aboard several captured spaceships. Volaris then explained to Valerian that the heretic Convolute had been correct about Lacrimosa's power. The Captain General now considered the escape of the cult leader to have been the greatest threat amongst the Splintered, and he ordered Valerian to hunt her down.
Jiminy Christmas, that's convoluted. It's like an Alfarius tale.
Well, when the
How many red
Grand
herrings were in
Master
that?
of Assassins is involved, you gotta know there's gonna be some
How many
shenanigans
red
going
herrings
on.
were in that? 4?
I don't know.
You normally only need 1.
And
Well,
then the one lone guy says, "Guess what? I'm the Grand Master of Assassins." Boom, 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 boom. See?
well, and on that note, we are out of time for today. Now join us next time as we wrap up the Custodes with our thoughts and perhaps how they were organized.
But for those of you who enjoyed our little show, could you please be so kind as to push that subscribe, like, or follow button? And if you wish to help us expand our work on 40k lore, by all means, support us by joining our membership program on our YouTube channel, Tales of Ashraka. Right now we have 4, but we could use more.
Hey, that rhymes!
Oh, and don't forget to purchase the Jotun Heist, sold wherever ebooks are sold.
Yes, and most importantly, have a great day. And until next time, this is Ekthar,
And Yuxin.
signing off.
Where are your brothers in arms now? On your shoulders you